be joined today by Jeff Spoerndle. He's Vice President of Best Crowd Management. So Jeff, thanks so much for being with us today. Obviously, you are someone that knows a lot about security, specifically in sort of like the sports venue and sports events realm. So perhaps you can just tell us a bit about how it's evolved over the last 5 years, and then obviously probably more specifically how it's had to evolve over the last 14 months, obviously since COVID has unfortunately hit us.
Absolutely. First off, thank you for having me. I look forward to the discussion. In relation to how security and event staffing has evolved over the last 5 years, really before COVID, it really was focused on creating the guest experience, really competing for that dollar in the marketplace to get that patron or guest to your venue, whether you're competing against other professional sports leagues or intercollegiate athletics or concerts or other means that are taking the discretionary dollar. So really creating that experience. So from a security perspective, after 9/11, one of the items that was really focused on was locking down the venues and really ensuring, a high level of security because they're high targets for terrorism. As time has gone by, doing that is top priority, but doing it in a way that you can ensure speed and efficiency is critical. So really looking at the last 5 years, really looking at ways to process crowds at entrances in an effective manner, in a quick manner, but in a 100% safe manner was really the focus. And really looking at, once they got into the facility, how you could deal with managing that crowd in a way where we can accomplish the robust security requirements that we have, but also do it in a way where it's kind of hidden so that people are enjoying the event without a ton of intrusions. As we headed into COVID, obviously, there were some very unique challenges. Back in March of 2020, the industry shut down and really looked at, how are we going to host events moving forward during a pandemic that we had no idea how long it was going to go. And I think the science of learning the actual, transmission of the disease was part of the challenge in trying to figure out how to open up these venues. So as we headed through 2020, in July, we started to see some venues open up without fans. PGA golf tournaments, NASCAR, Major League Baseball started moving in that direction. We as an organization worked a number of venues that didn't have fans. So the challenges that came with that is we still had to process hundreds of workers and credentialed media and players and personnel to come in and even host an event that had no fans. So really looking at how we did that, from temperature checking to adhering to the various leagues protocols regarding COVID, to making sure that we had secure zones for people that were on a testing protocol and people that weren't on a testing protocol, and really, looking at how we deal with individuals that may come down to the venue, fans, to try and be part of the action from the exterior of the venue, and really how we were going to deal with that. So during that early part of COVID, on the reopening that had closed venues, it really gave us a good opportunity to really kind of test some policies and procedures and protocols on a smaller group of people before we really started gradually reopening the buildings. In the fall of last year, we do a tremendous amount of work with the National Football League with their member teams, and also the NCAA with college football. Both those venues were really the first to really push forward with reopening with fans, and really working with our clients on how we designed a program hand in hand with them to ensure a safe return to the venue. Really looking at social distancing and how we can properly social distance fans, how we can deal with ingress to the facility and do it in a way where we are focused on processing people and not having those large crowds that we saw at the entry points before. Really working with the states that those venues operate in to work within their restrictions, and creating a plan specific to each venue, and really working at meeting the state requirements to be able to reopen, and then ultimately adhering to that. things such as enforcing mask enforcement when people are not specifically eating and drinking, is something that was a huge focus in staffing. Many of our venues that were open at 25% capacity, we were still staffing at probably 75% of what we would normally do, because we had to have extra entry points open, so that, literally you walk up to the venue and there was no line. We had to have extra people patrolling the stands to make sure that people were sitting in their proper seats. What we did over here was, they used either zip ties or wraps to actually block off the seats that weren't supposed to be used. And our officers and guest service personnel were there to make sure that those weren't breached. So really, one of the biggest challenges that we had as we reopened the venues was, number one, making sure that our employees were completely trained to the new COVID protocols and some of the concerns that may come forward that weren't real concerns before the pandemic. Number two, making them comfortable with coming to work. Everyone, was told for months on end, avoid mass gatherings, and stay home. Well, now we're asking people to come to mass gatherings and really work through that. So it was a real education process and really trying to show our employee base, okay, here's how you can create a solution that is safe and works extremely well, that reopens an industry that we all love. And, so it took a little bit of education. It worked really well. And a lot of our employees were really excited about it. Other employees were, I really would like to wait the pandemic out, which we definitely accommodated. But we got enough employees to staff the venue from our end and really execute these policies. And, each league had a little different protocols that we had to follow. Same with the colleges, and we adhered to that. So it was a very interesting time. And as we head into, the summer of 2021, the industry is starting to really bustle. We are opening venues like crazy. We have some of our venues that have decided to go back to 100% capacity. So those are some new challenges that we'll be facing over the next couple months. But we really anticipate, at least in the United States, that the majority of events will be running hopefully as normal by this fall.
Let's hope so. That's great news to hear. And obviously, as you sort of start this transition from no fans to a smaller number of fans, to then building up to full capacity fans in stadia again. Obviously over the last sort of 14-15 months, there's been changes and adaptations in terms of security. Whether permanent or temporary. So which ones do you foresee remaining in place, as we get back to, albeit the new normal, and which do you think that we will no longer need?
Well, I think it's a great question. And really, it's ultimately focused on, creating a comfortable environment for the guests that will allow them to safely return to the venue. Because just because the venue is open and just because they want to increase capacity doesn't mean that the general public will be ready to come back in those types of numbers. And, I think we've seen that in certain circumstances where, the venue will allow in X number of people, and you would think that pre-COVID, this would be a non-issue. And in the end, they can't fill it. They can't get to that 10,000 or 15,000 where maybe they were having 40,000 people in their venue before the pandemic. So really understanding the fan base and our clients and teams and colleges and universities are really doing research with their fan base on specific wants and needs of that market and really what they're looking at. And really our role is to work with our clients to facilitate the ultimate plan that they're looking for. So some of the things that we've seen that I believe, we'll see moving forward is, the concession aspect of it and really individuals being allowed by app to order food from their seats. And we saw a little bit of that before the pandemic in VIP areas and club areas and higher end places within the facility. But now it's more widespread. You can order your food straight from your seat, and then you go to the concession stand and all you're doing is grabbing a bag with that food and bringing it back to your seat to limit those lines and congestion points. Really looking at choke points throughout the facility. You know, when you walked a facility in the past, you'd have concession stands within the walls, and you'd have portable stands all over the place to maximize revenue in you know, points of sale. You know, now it's really looking with the facility and the concessionaire of where those choke points are, so that we can avoid those choke points to give a little bit more space. I think as we look at security screening, there's, you know, some new technology that's coming out from a metal detection standpoint that is, you know, allowing for quicker screening in our venues. You know, and that technology, I think, we'll see evolve over the next couple of years to really focus on a less intrusive way to metal detect and screen. You know, and then really, you know, as far as, you know, doing all digital ticketing. Digital ticketing is critical. It's almost self-serve. You can put, you know, a person at that pedestal and really be, you know, a customer service agent and really assist with that entry process. But that guest, you're not having to do any type of touching of a phone, touching of a ticket. And we really think that in the end, that's probably here to stay. Also, I think, you know, as we focus on, you know, coming out of this, really the education of all frontline staff, you know, in how to deal with concerns fans are going to have on things that we would have never imagined before. How do you deal with a fan that you're sitting next to that is coughing, that's making somebody uncomfortable? How do you deal with a fan that is really militant to the mask requirement, and somebody else is nursing a beer and technically they're meeting the policy of they don't have to wear a mask when they're drinking or eating, but they're making somebody else feel uncomfortable? How do you deal with somebody that comes to you and says maybe they're not feeling, you know, quite right? And really, how do you triage that issue and get them to the isolation area? So those are all things that we see as items moving forward.
And then obviously, you know, after a year of, or a year plus at this stage of enforced shutdowns, you know, what do you foresee, you know, what are the sports complex and teams facing moving forward?
Well, I think it depends on where they're at throughout the United States, but a lot of states were truly shut down pretty much for a 15-month period of time. In those states, it's almost restarting and reopening your entire venue. Because a lot of your staff are you know, part-time seasonal people that probably had to go off and get work elsewhere. So really, you know, almost like reopening the venue as if it's a brand new facility. So, you know, recruiting, hiring, backgrounding, training, running, you know, mock exercises before the facility open. Because, you know, I think in all facilities, you know, you're going to have turnover from event to event, but that's not going to be 70% of your staff. You know, and really that's a real possibility because people were unable to work for such a long period of time. In other states, specifically in the southern part of the United States, where the venues were more open, you know, because here in the States, it really was decided by the actual state jurisdiction on what they would allow. So there were a lot of states in the southern part of the United States that were open at 25 to 30% capacity. And those facilities were using a lot of employees to staff their venues because we had to adhere to COVID protocols. So those are a little bit more normal because they've been actually working in the COVID protocol and really understanding the requirements. They've been trained to the requirements. So really we're dealing with two scenarios. One, in closed down states, a simple rebuild and restart. Two, in the southern states, it's just continuing to enhance on what we put in place last year as we head into the new seasons.
And obviously, you know, sort of how would you say that crowd and fan management and venue management has sort of evolved over the last year? And then what are you hearing from, you know, the clubs, the teams, the venues, when it comes to, you know, obviously this coming very quickly down the tracks of, you know, full fans or at least higher capacity numbers of fans back in their stands?
Well, I think there's a little room for error. You only get one opportunity to create a first impression. And I think that's key, especially with, you know, a fan base that is excited to get back into the facilities, but also a little cautious too. So making sure that the protocols and procedures are adhered to and enforced is one of the biggest feedbacks that we get from our clients. Simple things such as mask enforcement. Really sticking on that mask enforcement, because there's so many different political views on masks that it's a constant challenge. So we really spend a ton of time training our staff on mask enforcement. The other thing is really looking at the social distancing aspect of it, and our teams making sure that our staff is really focused on identifying that. Because it's tough, because if you come in a group of 4 and you're congregating, well, that's okay, because you're sitting with that group of 4. But if you see a group of 10 people together and you have pods of 4 seats and that's all you're allotting in your venue, we really need to be pretty proactive in approaching that group of 10 people and getting them to get socially distant. And I think that's one of the keys. The other thing too is, the teams are in a position after really being shut down for a year that, they need to rebuild their business base. They need to start getting revenue coming in the doors. And in the end, our job is to help facilitate that. We really create that first impression on the guest. And, in the past, there were certain rules and policies that maybe we would get direction from our clients when it came down to it. In the end, they weren't going to upset a guest over, and they would make an accommodation. Some of these COVID protocols are not that way. So really understanding and working with our clients to make sure that we have processes as far as the steps of enforcement. Some of our clients want us to be very strict and very non-tolerant of people not adhering to the rules. And some of our other clients, they want adherence to the rules, but they also want to make sure that we're not ejecting people over them. So, as we move forward, I think that will be a continuing challenge that we deal with, especially as we head into the fall.
And then sort of taking that a step forward, how are you planning to sort of balance, you've got to look at the new security, public health, and then obviously, like you said, delivering the best possible guest experience as well. How are you going to deliver that?
Well, I think the key is increased training. We've got very, I think, creative over the pandemic in the use of technology to deliver training. Before the pandemic, it was really a focus for not only us, but our clients to get all of our people into the venues to train, which I truly believe is very important and still very important. But in the end, digital training has been a tremendous thing. And we've actually seen some real excellent benefits to it. Our company provided service for the Super Bowl last year in Tampa. And, we provided all the coverage for the Super Bowl experience. And it was about 500 people each day. And in really looking at that point of the pandemic, trying to get people trained up in what was between 8 to 12 hours of training specific to that event, and trying to do that in person was very impractical. So we were very successful with setting up, systems not only on our learning management system where they would go on and take a course and take a test, but also in a team setting or a Zoom setting where you actually have an instructor that's speaking to groups of 20 to 30 people. And we found that it was extremely effective, actually almost more effective than what we saw in the facilities, because you get into the facilities and you bring a group of people in, sometimes it gets a little distracting and people start, congregating and talking and all that, where when you're sitting in your living room, you really don't have the ability to do that, as long as we can keep their focus on the screen and listening. And we've been very successful with that. So it's a combination of really doing virtual trainings and also looking at what does have to be in person now that we really can get into venues and it's safe to get into venues, and really increasing the number of training hours. Also, as we're doing hiring and recruiting, we are being very careful to really look at people that are very compassionate in how they approach things. Hiring somebody that maybe is just looking at the position as just a job to pay a bill is maybe not the best candidate for us. We need somebody that are going to be good listeners, that are going to be able to listen to the guests and really understand, even if they're not complying with the rule. Because, one of the things that I really preach in our organization is there's always a way to diffuse something. If you get to a point where, it's escalated to a very negative ejection, generally, if you look at that incident, something could have happened to get that calmed down somewhere. So really, focusing on finding people that are trainable to be able to do that, I think is key, because, as you look at it, what we've seen in the venues thus far at limited capacity is our general crowd control issues that we used to deal with have become more limited. We don't see as many fights. We don't see as many arguments. We don't see, just the conduct that had become notorious with some events. That's because they're spread out. And it's also, I think, you have a different group of people coming that are true avid fans for these teams. As they get combined with the people that are looking to come in and just maybe blow off a little steam, let's say, it's how are we going to deal with that? And having those compassionate listeners that can triage issues and educate on issues, and really approach that guest explaining, hey, this is the policy, this is why it's in place, and we would respectfully ask you to follow it. And then when they reject, really being able to triage, hey, these are the next steps that are going to happen if you don't adhere. And really the ultimate goal is not to empty that seat and eject somebody. The ultimate goal is to get them to comply and enjoy the event.
And then, but what's your outlook, having spoken obviously over the last number of months with industry leaders, what's your outlook for the sporting events industry and indeed the increasing role that security will play as we reopen?
Well, first off, the outlook is good. The outlook is we are reopening in the States. Pretty much all sporting events are moving forward. The next step, I think, is concerts and really, figuring out a way to get those, going on a regular basis. And really we're seeing people book for the fall. So, I think as the vaccination levels go up, those will start moving forward. I think the security role in it is critical. Each of our venues have plans with the states to be able to open to the capacities that they want. There's protocols and procedures that they're promising the states to be able to gain permits to open these events. And, we are the ones to make sure that many of those requirements are upheld. And we take it extremely seriously in making sure that again, we train to it. We clearly understand the expectations. We have clear communication with our clients to make sure that we understand the scenarios and how they want them handled. And then ultimately, post-event, we're reviewing how it went, how it can be changed, how it can be tweaked, and then move on to that next event and just keep learning as we go. I think that the biggest challenge is as we continue to open is finding staff to work and really looking at how we focus on getting that staff, really number one, comfortable with working in a mass, a mass attended event. Number two, in the United States, there's a significant amount of money being paid out right now for unemployment. And really, for somebody to come out and work 2 or 3 events a month, it might cost them more to actually work those events because of money they're losing off of unemployment. So, trying to figure out exactly how you convince somebody to give up money to come down and work the event. But, we're being more creative in how we recruit people. And also there's a pent up demand. I believe that, people want to get out of their house and they want to, be around people in a safe way.
And finally, COVID aside, I know that's quite difficult to do at the moment, but, what are the challenges when it comes to the sort of sports venue and sports events industry? And then obviously, the solutions to those very specific challenges?
Well, I think the number one challenge in the industry right now is staffing. Finding qualified staff to work these positions is a real challenge. And really looking at, the way we're really focusing on solving that is really looking at the employee experience. Because as an organization, we have always had the philosophy that if we create an employee experience for that employee of ours, they will ultimately go out and create a tremendous guest experience for the individual coming to the venue. So really looking at ourselves, but also with our clients, because a lot of times, they're creating the environment that we're giving our employees is, where are they parking? How are they checking in? In the past, maybe it would be a similar scenario to like you'd see at Disney World with a long line to check in at our venues. Really how can we facilitate that in a more efficient, effective manner? Really looking at break areas for the employees in the venues, looking at how do we effectively schedule people to be more creative in meeting their unique demands in today's fast-paced environment that everybody lives in. And then ultimately, rewarding them for the successes, and then retraining for the items that maybe are opportunities, and really focusing on, realizing that the days of the staff just wanting to come to the venue because your XYZ team and, it's a big event, maybe that's over, at least for the time period of moving forward for the short term. Really focusing on, making it a pretty special experience for them. And a lot of that can be done with no money, and just rethinking the structure of how, their experience is, and basically taking, almost a day in their footsteps, and really looking at how we create that experience for the employees, so in turn they service the fan. Because if you have enough employees that are properly trained, that understand your protocols and procedures, your venue's unstoppable. Because in the end, whether the team wins or loses on the field really shouldn't matter. You want that person to come to your venue and have just an awesome experience. And we're a big part of that, and we take that extremely seriously, and really focus hard on having the right tools in place to get it done.
That's great, Jeff. So it sounds like, it's all about sort of communication, building confidence, and both for the staff and obviously the fans alike. But would you say that that's the sort of the two key pins kind of thing, are the communication and building confidence?
Absolutely. And, we have taken increased steps in both areas. Working with our teams and clients to communicate policies and procedures to fans, and making sure they know what to expect when they come to the venue is critical. And then two, with our employees, really constant engagement with them is very important. The uncertainty of what's going on out there, and you have events that are randomly canceled because of COVID outbreaks or things that happen. So making sure that you have really consistent communication with everyone is so critical, and we've doubled down on it, and we've been luckily very successful because of it.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for your time, Jeff. Hopefully get to see you in person in the not too distant, as live events and everything get back to normal. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.